curious.
I'm curious. I am curious. Curious.
By nature.
Welcome to Curious by Nature. I'm Jessica Johnson from Newswise. What's your mindfulness practice? The resources available to settle your mind and center yourself are more plentiful than ever. Ironically, it can be a bit overwhelming to choose from the abundance of mindfulness options. But one researcher is teasing apart the question, does the type of mindfulness practice make a difference? To uncover how these different approaches engage the brain, our guest today is using EEG. This allows scientists to compare brain activity in people with high levels of anxiety and to investigate which practices are more effective than others. Join us to explore how mindfulness training can shift the way people relate to worry and how some practices work better for certain types of anxiety. Dr. Gupta, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Resh Gupta. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist by training, and I'm currently a postdoctoral research associate with the Mindfulness Science and Practice Cluster and the Cognitive Control and Psychopathology Laboratory at Washington University in St. Louis.
Can you tell me more about your work and your role?
Yes, so in my current position as a postdoc, I use neural measures such as EEG, behavioral measures such as cognitive tasks that you do in a lab, and self-report measures, so these will be paper and pencil, how are you feeling right now kind of measures, to understand the effects of mindfulness on a process called cognitive control in anxious populations.
Is anxiety the same as stress and worry?
So anxiety, stress, worry, they have similarities. They have things in common. But when I think of worry, for example, worry is a form of anxiety or a symptom of anxiety, which we can talk about a little bit more, especially in terms of the article and how they're connected. Stress is also a similar phenomenon, but different than anxiety. The way that I differentiate the two is that stress is really something having to do with what we're experiencing in the moment. For example, I'm stressed about a public event coming up where I have to give a speech, or I'm stressed because I got into a disagreement with a good friend. With anxiety, the thing that really differentiates it is it's very future oriented. It's us worrying about something in the future that hasn't come to pass yet. So, really, the timeline, I would say, is what differentiates stress and anxiety. And then worry is a symptom of anxiety.
So I heard about your work from an article on Newswise, and it was really fascinating. It was about, can you combat anxiety with mindfulness? And um, so there was so much within there that I was wanting to talk with you about. And if you can first start off and tell me more about the study that was published in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews.
Absolutely. So, that paper really focused on some of the things that we just discussed and this complication with how anxiety has been conceptualized and defined. Anxiety isn't just one thing, anxiety can be many things. So, anxiety can be something that we're diagnosed with as a clinical disorder, such as generalized anxiety disorder or social anxiety disorder. But anxiety is also a trait that we all have. We have some dispositional level of anxiety, all of us. For some of it's higher than other people. So, anxiety can also be a state. We can be anxious in one moment, but not another, depending on what's going on in our lives. So the paper really focuses on how diverse that anxiety can manifest. And also, mindfulness itself is not a one size fits all cure for anxiety. There are different kinds of mindfulness practices that are really good for different kinds of anxiety. And so that's really overall what the paper expresses, that we can't use a one size fits all approach to treat anxiety. We need to use precision when we're trying to help people with mental health problems like anxiety.
So can you tell me about the different types of anxiety and what types of mindfulness exercises work with which one?
We can think of anxiety as a trait that we all have, which you can think of as a dispositional level of anxiety that we all have. But even things like trait anxiety can be broken down further. So if we break down this dispositional level of anxiety, we have one component called anxious apprehension, and that's really focused on this worrying that you had brought up earlier, Jessica. So see, that's really where the worry lies and this anxious apprehension, perseverative negative thinking. So it's very future oriented, often negative thinking. So we've got anxious apprehension as one dimension there of trait anxiety. Another dimension of trait anxiety is anxious arousal. So this is more focused on the bodily or somatic feelings of anxiety, like sweaty palms, dizziness, alterations in heart rate, muscle tension. So this is a different dimension of trait anxiety. So this shows you how we can really conceptualize and break down anxiety in many different ways. And what we propose in the paper is that these two different kinds of anxiety are essentially mitigated better by different kinds of mindfulness practices. So for anxious apprehension, which is really worry centric, there is a mindfulness practice called focused attention, which we recommend in the paper should be most helpful for people suffering with anxious apprehension. So, with focused attention, this is a mindfulness practice that teaches us to focus on an anchor, such as our breath or a sound, and you keep bringing your attention back to that anchor every time it wanders. So, just gently redirecting your attention. And what this should do for people who have worry is because worry is occupying so much of their working memory and it's taking up a lot of space and preventing their goals for everyday life from being maintained in working memory. That practice of retraining your attention to keep coming back to an anchor helps to strengthen that goal representation in working memory and help that worry to be able to diminish. So for that's how we link anxious apprehension with focused attention meditation. So now let's go over to the anxious arousal side of things. So for these people, they tend to be very hypervigilant to what's happening in their environment, monitoring for anything that may be potentially threatening to them. And that's really a good source of where that bodily anxiety is coming from, those sweaty palms and the dizziness. So for these people, we believe that a different kind of mindfulness practice called open monitoring should be especially helpful. In open monitoring, we teach individuals to essentially just pay attention to the content of your whole experience without picking a specific anchor. Just let the content of your experience come in and out without judging it and without reacting to it. And so, in that way, for these people who are always monitoring and on alert, it teaches them to instead just take the content of their experience in a non judgmental and non reactive way. So, this helps to calm down essentially that bodily anxiety that they're experiencing.
Are there mindfulness exercises that implement both things?
Yes. So, when we think of frequently used 8-week mindfulness courses, such as mindfulness based stress reduction and mindfulness based cognitive therapy, those have both focused attention and open monitoring practices in them. So those courses teach individuals both. But the reason that sometimes that causes confusion in research is because people will respond better to one type of practice versus the other, depending on which kind of anxiety is most prominent for them. So a lot of the times, these interventions are very effective for people who are suffering with anxiety because it can combat both types of symptoms. But sometimes there's some people who are experiencing one type of symptom more than the other, right? And so they would benefit almost from a more pure intervention that focused more on focused attention practice or open monitoring practice.
And so it's also important for people to understand when they are experiencing one or the other, and then which tool to choose from.
Yes, and to know that there are tools available that are very specific for the kinds of anxiety, or at least that's what we posit. And so I would always say if you're experiencing any of this, and if it is interfering in your daily life, seek help from a professional, and they can help guide you to practices that may be well suited to the kind of symptomatology that you're experiencing.
It seems like the anxious anxiety type is something that a lot of people at some point in their life experience. Like worry is kind of a common topic, probably. I would love to know, have you come across people that don't have worry or don't have anxious anxiety?
Yes, and I frequently get asked, can't you have both? Yes, yes. It isn't that you fall into one camp or the other. It's really just connecting certain types of anxiety to certain kinds of cognitive issues that they cause, right? And then matching that with a specific intervention that's most suited for that particular type of anxiety and or that particular accompanying cognitive deficit or cognitive sort of maladaptive nature. I would say, to answer your question, Jessica, it's been very rare for me to not find people who are dealing with anxious apprehension when I'm recruiting people who have high anxiety. So I would have a much easier time recruiting people with the anxious apprehension subtype compared to the anxious arousal pure subtype. You'll often find them coexisting, but I've been doing a study where I'm just looking at the anxious apprehensive type. Of course, they do have arousal, but I'm looking for people who are especially high with worry, and it is very easy to find these folks because, like you said, worry is prevalent, especially now with everything going on. And what's been really interesting is what's causing the worry in these people. It's so diverse.
Do you have any information about that?
I have people come in and they say, hey, I'm especially anxious right now. And these are people who are trait anxious. So these are people who are generally anxious anyway, but are telling me because of the times, because of the world that we're living in, they're even more anxious than before. Some of them are having family issues. And so they're worrying a lot about their futures. Financial issues are leading to worry. A lot of this, as I'd mentioned with apprehension, is future oriented. They're worried about their future in some way, whether it's their future with their partner, their future financially, the future of the world. So it's really interesting because the diversity in terms of the kind of worry, even in these people who I'm putting into a group, is so high. It's so diverse in terms of what's really worrying them. But they fall into this sort of recruitment sector to where I put them in a group, but they're all so different.
Another piece that was in the news release that was really interesting was about goals and anxiety. And can you talk more about that?
So, what we propose in the paper is that in people who have anxiety, there's a problem with something called cognitive control. And cognitive control is your ability essentially to keep in mind what you have to do to carry out your goals. So, just to put that in a different way, cognitive control is defined as your ability to carry out whatever needs to be done to accomplish everyday life goals, right? So, for people who have anxiety, there is a maladaptive cognitive control process. It's not functioning the way that it should be. And so, that essentially is a good target then to try to use some sort of intervention or treatment to improve. If we can improve cognitive control in people who have anxiety, maybe we can improve their symptoms. So that's where it came in. And we linked different kinds of cognitive control problems to the different forms of anxiety. So if we take those people with anxious apprehension that I had mentioned, they really have trouble keeping goals in mind because their worries occupying so much of their working memory. And so that's taking up the worries taking up too much room from the goals. We call that proactive control. So people with anxious apprehension have problems with proactive control, which is one type of cognitive control. And then if we take the other side, the people with anxious arousal, because they're monitoring all the time for sources of potential threat, we believe they have a different kind of problem with cognitive control called reactive control. So essentially, they're very reactive to things in their environment that might be threatening. Their attention's really easily grabbed. And so that makes it really difficult for them, essentially, right, to have good cognitive control. So there's different kinds of cognitive control that we say is essentially maladaptive in these different kinds of anxiety.
Fascinating. So I think what I read was that that cognitive control area is also the same place in the brain where that anxiety lies. So it's either one or the other. You can either decide to be anxious or you can decide to get things done.
Yes, I mean, especially when we think about anxious apprehension folks, right? Yes, that working memory space is where your goals are stored. And so if worry is taking up all that space, that's leaving less rooms for your goals to be stored.
So fascinating.
Yeah, so I mean, I always call worry a working memory hog. It's hogging up too much space. It's not leaving enough room for your goals. And if you can't keep that goal in mind, you're not going to be able to carry out your actions for everyday life. And so that's why we believe that mindfulness can hopefully help train you to better keep your goals in mind, pushing out that worry.
Because it's not only goals, it's also dreams, it's hopes, it's, you know, everything that people want for a better life is kind of maybe stored in those goals. And worry is a killer of that. That is so interesting. I mean, you kind of know it, you kind of can understand it, but when you picture them both being in the same part of the brain and like it's either one is fed or the other, then that's really fascinating.
So, cognitive control is the ability to regulate your thoughts and your actions in a way that helps you to achieve your goals. And so, one everyday example of cognitive control is imagine that you have to go to the grocery store after work. So, what you can do is you can keep in mind or maintain in your mind that goal. I have to go to the grocery store after work. So, then during the workday, when your colleague asks you, hey, do you want to have a meeting after work? If you're maintaining that information in your mind, you can say, no, I got to go to the grocery store. I really need to pick up a lot of items. And then you can carry that out effectively. You can take care of that goal because you were able to maintain that information in your mind. So that's just an everyday example. But as you can see, it's critical to be able to do that, to hold information in mind so that you can take care of what you need to take care of every day. So coming back to what you said, Jessica, about like some of those goals are future oriented, yes. But some of them are just getting through the moment, right? Like, I need to do this. I need to take out the trash. So I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to take out the trash. I need to take my kids to school now. So I need to make sure they've got their lunch, make sure that they've got their backpacks, get them in the car. All of this stuff takes sort of planning, right? Keeping information in mind so you can execute all of this properly. So, a lot of our goals that we think about and value are frequently future oriented. Like, okay, I need to do this so I get a promotion, or I need to work really hard next week so that I can take my vacation and feel like I've earned it. But even in the moment, everything that we're doing, if you think about it, is an action that needed to be planned and carried out appropriately. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of really vague and hard to describe, but goals can even be momentary, like what we're doing right now.
It can be a goal to get up and get dressed.
Yep.
Some people, if they have severe depression, right? Or if they have that other anxiety that, they're hyper vigilant and aware, then they might really be impeded from doing kind of some basic things.
Depression is very comorbid with anxiety. Frequently, someone who has anxiety has depression and vice versa. So
Mm.
that's another thing. How do you treat the depression? Is it going to respond to a similar kind of treatment as the anxiety portion would respond to? So that's something else I'm really interested in. But yes, getting out of bed, making breakfast, these are everyday life requirements. And sometimes it's very difficult for people to find the motivation who have depression to do it. So even being able to carry that out is important. And I would just say don't be hard on yourself. It is a very difficult time in our world right now, and in each person's life, everyone's dealing with something right now. Worrying is prevalent, but It's really when you become conscious of this. Like right now, Jessica, you're very conscious of it. You're thinking about this is how much I worried and on this day or in this week. I really find that with mindfulness, when you've understood or recognized that your mind's been wandering or that you haven't been present, that's really the important part. It's not how many breaths can I stay on? How long can I keep this up? It's really when my mind was wandering and I can come back and I realize I wasn't here in the present moment, that is almost a form of enlightenment in itself. You're like, hey, I wasn't here. I was somewhere else, but I'm here now. I'm back here. Every time you do that, it's almost like you're experiencing enlightenment in that moment.
Can we get into the specifics of maybe what people do with that anxious apprehension or worry? What are those maybe mindfulness techniques, or if you want to even just mention one specifically, and we could even maybe just do it quickly, or just, if there's something like it needs to be 10 minutes at least, or, maybe there's details of the specifics of what that looks like.
Something like that would look like, okay, you can close your eyes if you would like, you can lower your gaze, and you can bring your attention to your breath and just focus your attention on your breath. Feel the sensation of your belly rising and falling with each breath that you take. And it's very natural for your mind to wander. That's okay. Just gently bring your mind back to that sensation in your belly or the feeling of the breath every time your mind wanders. Sometimes it helps to think, breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I am breathing out. And whenever you feel called, you're welcome to open your eyes gently and reorient yourself to where you are.
So that is really, yes, centralizing. I don't know if that's the word to use for it, but yes, so calming.
It's amazing what that can do. It's very difficult. We often say it's simple but not easy. We're wired to be continually thinking. Our brains are always going. We're in preparation mode constantly, always trying to get ready for the next thing or take care of the things on our to-do list. Even before we picked up our list, we're thinking about, oh, I need to do this and this and this and this in the future. So it's very hard to live in the moment. But if we can train ourselves to do this practice that is simple but not easy, it's going to help us to gain more control in a way that helps us to maintain our goals in mind.
Are the benefits of this for the moment right after you do it? Do you need to keep going back to it? How long does it last? How much does it help for that anxious apprehension that people might be feeling?
This is something you'd have to do regularly in order to see its benefit. You will get benefits in the moment when you're doing it, but then when it stops, you don't want that to go away or you want it to continue. And the way it continues is you keep practicing, and then you also take mindfulness off the meditation cushion and into daily life. So we always say that there are formal and informal practices when you're learning mindfulness. In formal practices, we sit and we do our meditation, or we do walking meditation. We do focus attention practice like I just did with you, Jessica. That's a formal practice. We call it on the cushion because it's you're sitting and meditating. But we can take these practices off the cushion and into everyday life, and we call that informal practice. And that's where we infuse mindfulness into even the most mundane activities like washing dishes or taking our dog for a walk. So it's really important if you want this to stay with you and become a way of life to not only practice it frequently, but to also infuse it into your daily life. So really pay attention to what you're doing. Notice if you're on automatic pilot and you're not really where you are. So when you're taking a shower, are you really there or are you 10,000 miles away in your mind? Feel the drops as they hit your back. Feel the slippery nature of the soap. That's how you're right there in the moment. That's all going to help you to implement this into your life and make it a part of your life.
Is prayer considered a mindfulness exercise in and of itself? Just that, or do you have to have specific components like what you just mentioned?
Something like prayer, another type of contemplative practice. So I think of it as something where it's different, but it's also got a similar outcome in that it teaches you, right, to be present with something. It also has a hope component to it, right? When you pray, connection to a spirit, to a deity, which can also bring comfort. So I consider it a different kind of contemplative practice, just like mindfulness is a contemplative practice. You're really contemplating on something, right? Connecting to what's happening in the present moment. So for some people, they'll be able to achieve a similar outcome through maybe prayer or a different kind of contemplative practice as they might be able to through mindfulness. And this really comes down to something that I believe, which is there are many paths to the same goal. So some people can reach that through yoga. Some people can reach that through mindfulness. Some people can reach that through prayer. Maybe someone needs traditional cognitive behavioral therapy to get better. So it really kind of goes to show you that because everyone has such a unique experience, the same thing is not going to work for everyone. But you still have the ability to reach a better outcome through many different means if you can find the one that works best for you.
Or maybe, if someone is journaling, maybe they take a moment at the end to also do a kind of that breathing and noticing, or before they do it, and maybe combining things. And like you said, implementing it into your daily life, I think is so wonderful. And with those tedious things that we have to do, why not make them a little bit more useful?
And that's what's really interesting when you take it off the cushion because it's so easy to say, oh, I did my meditation sit today. I'm good. I'm done. But if it stops there, you're not making it a part of your life. And making it a part of your life is what's really going to help you to get better if you have anxiety. It's going to help you for times when you need to confront something big if you've worked with small things before, kind of prepared yourself, right? You don't want to practice on big things only. You want to get yourself ready to face something like that by making it a part of your life. So, absolutely. And like you said about journaling, it's a wonderful combination because then you're able to document your insights or to prepare yourself, for example, before you do a seated meditation. Get your thoughts down. It's really important to capture your experiences so you can reflect on them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Resh Gupta.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.